Good evening, I'm Guion Foreman, President of the Police Board, and I am calling the board's July 20th public meeting to order. I'd like to thank CAN TV for covering this meeting. It's being broadcast on Channel 27 and live streamed on cantv.org and CAN TV app. In addition to the police board members, wait, I'm sorry. All right. I'd like to announce who is here from the police board. So first we have, well, do we do attendance? We don't? Yes, all right. Our notes are off a little bit today. So from the police board, we have Paula Wolf.
Here.
All right, yeah, how about this? We're going to do something a little new. Everybody from the police board is going to introduce themselves rather than that. So I'm Guion Foreman. I'm the president of the police board, and I am also the executive director, the president and CEO of Emerald South Economic Development Collaborative.
Paula Wolf, I'm the vice president of the police board. I'm from the Illinois Justice Project. You know, we've never actually gone off script before, so this is terrifying.
Good evening. I'm Stephen Block, a member of the police board. I'm also a partner at the law firm of Holland & Knight.
Good evening. I'm Asia Carr-Favors. I'm a member of the police board, and I'm also a data privacy and tax-exempt organizations attorney here in Chicago.
Good evening. I'm Riley Cusack. I'm a member of the police board. I'm the former general counsel of Ariel Investments and currently retired.
All right.
I'm Nanette Dorley, member of the police board, and a retired FBI agent.
Michael Eady, member of the Chicago Police Board and pastor of People's Church of the Harvest in East Garfield Park.
Jorge Montes, a 4-year member of the police board and the director of Montes and Associates, a Chicago law firm.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andreas Safakis. I am also a board member here for the Chicago Police Board. I currently am a project manager with the General Services Administration of the federal government, specializing in the judiciary. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. That was actually, you know, we speak to you guys every month, but you see us here, but to kind of understand who we are other than this, I think is probably also something important. In addition to police board members this evening, we have Interim Superintendent of Police, Fred Waller, Chief Administrator of Civilian Office of Police Accountability, Andrea Kirsten, Deputy Inspector General for Public Safety, Tabara Richardson, Chief of Chicago Police Department's Bureau of Internal Affairs, Yolanda Talley, Assistant General Counsel to the Superintendent, Scott Spears, and we have Police Board Assistant Jasmine Rollins here this evening. We will now proceed to the items on the meeting agenda. We'll have time at the end of the meeting for public comments. First, we are pleased to have with us this evening Jadine Chow, Chief Safety and Security Officer for Chicago Public Schools, who will give us a presentation on the whole school safety process. Jadine. Sure.
Good evening, everybody. Hi, everyone. President Foreman, Superintendent Waller, and everyone else on the board. Thank you so much for having me tonight. Members in the audience, I'm Jadine Chow, Chicago Public Schools Chief of Safety and Security. Thank you so much. I was asked to give a presentation this evening on whole school safety, which is our school resource officer program. Right now, as you would know, around the country, there's a lot of conversation around police in schools. After the tragic summer of 2020, when George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis, that really brought about a whole conversation around the role of police inside of our schools. Chicago was no different. If you were watching the news that summer, there were a lot of demonstrations outside, a lot of conversations inside offices around what is the role of police in schools. In Chicago, we have a very strong relationship with the Chicago Police Department. We're extremely grateful for their service. Every day they're helping us. We hope we're helping them. We're supporting 320,000 students in our school district, and they're doing well. We all have our challenges, but again, with this great partnership that we've established with Chicago Police Department, I'm confident and very optimistic that were going to continue to be on the rise. That summer of 2020, our board passed a resolution to say we need to look at how we look at CBD, Chicago Police, inside of our schools. I will be very candid. There was a lot of conversation around possibly just removing all the police from our schools. As Chief of Safety and Security, I actually got up and I said, I don't think that's a good idea. There's a lot of safety that we get from each other, and we're not ready. And so they said, fine, we'll pass a resolution. That's what I'm going to talk about tonight, my very quick presentation, and then we'll open it up to questions. So here's quickly my agenda. I want to talk about Chicago Public Schools. I always, because it's my life every day. Doesn't everybody know about Chicago Public Schools? Maybe not. So I'm here to just give you an update on sort of how we've been doing over the last 10 years. In addition, I'll show you some data to back up what we're doing. And then I'm going to talk about the whole school safety process, is what we look at for how we work with police in schools. So when I started in 2011, I've been in this job 12 years as Chief of Safety and Security. We had a thing called zero tolerance. And if you don't know what zero tolerance is, it's for our students. There are certain circumstances, certain infractions where you have to suspend a kid, where you have to expel them. Zero tolerance was very popular around the country. Chicago Public Schools at that time says, we're going to try something new. We're going to try to be less punitive because punishment doesn't work. Let's try instructional as our consequences. And so we moved to what we call restorative process, which is, again, more instructional, not punitive. We built a system that is actually supportive for kids. This is the CPS Apple. I'm not going to go through it, but safety and security is on the Apple, so it's one of our top priorities. And we want to make sure that we're keeping kids in school. So we're not expelling them, we're not suspending them. Because when they're in schools, they're safer. When they're in schools, they're getting the education they deserve. And that's 24/7. What that means is our business is keeping them safe 24/7, even if not with us 24/7. What happens on their weekends, what happens in their community, whatever they experience outside of school, comes inside of the classroom. So it's got to be something that we're worried about. It's got to be something that we're partnering with families and communities on, and that's what this presentation is about. So I just talked about that. We moved away from zero tolerance. We're now on a restorative protocol and culture, which involves social emotional learning. So back when I started, we didn't have an office of social emotional learning. Now we have an entire department of social emotional learning. And as a result, we've seen large reductions in suspensions and police notifications. However, the sad part about it and the unfortunate part about it is we're still seeing a disproportionality towards children of color. And so it's our goal to make sure that from an equity focus that we are working to understand that disparity and eliminating that disparity. So here's some numbers. Okay, these are factual. And you can see back in 2014, we could go back further, but 2014 is far enough, and the results are even more favorable if you go back further. You can see from 2014 to 2022, which is the school year we ended just a year ago, so we haven't published our 2023 numbers yet. But our numbers from 2022 versus 2014, we've shown a 75% reduction in out-of-school suspensions for our high schools. We've shown an 86% reduction in out-of-school suspensions in our elementary schools. What that means, again, is we're keeping kids inside of our classrooms. Even as important is expulsions. So expulsions is when kids are actually removed from the school. So you are sent to like an alternative school, or you're sent to stay at home. Not helpful for young people. They're supposed to be in school. And so what we said, let's try to eliminate expulsions. And so you can see we're very proud of this. We started out, you can see in 2014, we had almost 200 expulsions. And now as of, you can look at like 2020 again, we're going into the pandemic, we actually went down to almost single digit. And so I like to tell everyone, we actually put the expulsion department out of business. So we don't have an expulsion department anymore. There used to be an entire group of people, their only job was expulsions. There's so few now. We have an expulsion committee, but we removed the department. You could see 71% reduction in high schools, 96% reduction in elementary schools. However, pandemic did what the pandemic did, and so you'll see we have a significant upgrade in our expulsions and our suspensions post-pandemic, but we are confident that we're going to get that under control and bring that back. And then we're here to talk about police. Our police notifications, even those, again, with these protocols, the police notifications are down. You're going to eradicate the school-to-prison pipeline. We're going to do that by stop involving police in non-police matters. And so again, we say to our schools, we change our policy, do not call the police unless there's a criminal matter or unless there's an extreme safety issue that requires intervention beyond the capability of the school. The numbers show it. Again, we have an uptick. We're going to reclaim that back. And sorry, my slide got a little messed up here. So again, as I shared at the end of the summer of 2020, our board in August 2020 passed a resolution. The resolution says CPS needs to look at how we're going to begin to phase out police in our schools. Again, we said we're not ready to take them out fully. Felt pretty strongly about that, and thankfully our board supported us. But they said we need to come up with a process that looks at this from a community lens, from an equity lens. So what we did was we brought together 5 community-based organizations. These are some of the organizations that were out there demonstrating, candidly. And they came together and we said, we'll put together a process, but here's some guardrails. One of the guardrails is, you've got to accept on the front end, we're not going to rip off the Band-Aid and remove all the police. If you can accept that, we can move forward. They said, we are totally with you. They then created a process that would involve community engagement. Community engagement that says, we're going to look to the local school to decide how they want to work with police. So we're not going to force you to keep them. We're not going to force you to remove them. But we're going to talk about what does safety mean to you. And that's where we came up with this thing called whole school safety. A lot of people think safety is just about your physical safety. So if I'm walking on the street, I better lock my car doors. I got to make sure that if I need help, I've got my finger on my emergency button, whatever that is. That's your physical safety. But people often don't consciously think about their emotional safety. And what we've seen in schools is the child's emotional safety is as, if not more important than their physical safety. Because it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If I walk into school every day and I don't feel safe, it's not welcoming. If I feel like people are out to maybe target me, they're going to be triggered. And then something else will happen. An incident will happen, and now your physical safety is at risk. And so the other thing about that is relational trust. So these are the 3 legs of whole school safety: physical safety, emotional safety, and relational trust. Relational trust is the relationships that we have with each other. If every student in the building has a trusted adult that they can go to, our schools will be safe, hands down. We see that in our schools. But if you walk into some of our schools and they don't have that trust, it's going to be dicey because everyone's going to look at each other and kids will not share what's going on with them and vice versa. But if we have that relational trust, if someone's going through something, they're going to share it with somebody and then we can address it before it becomes a serious incident. I'll just share really quickly. Wednesday, I presented at the Chicago Board of Education. And one of the items that I was presenting was x-ray machines. Like when you go to the airport, you have x-ray machines. A lot of questions about x-ray machines. Are x-ray machines effective in school in keeping them safe? The answer is, there's actually no research that's definitive to show they actually keep schools safe. I will say there's correlation. We catch weapons through x-ray machines. Every year we catch weapons. So there's at least correlation, but is there causation? And the causation, again, I maintain, just the x-ray machines themselves will not work because they'll find a way around it. Sneak it in a side door. But if you have relationships with your kids, they will tell you, that guy, Gian, has a gun today. They will tell you because they want to be safe and they want Gian to be safe. And so that is how relationships work. And so what is this process? Whoops, before I go back. The process is we go to those schools that have school resource officers, and there's only a subset. There are only high schools that have school resource officers. And we say, form a committee consisting of parents, students, teachers, and the principal, and staff. Form a committee and come up with a plan that incorporates these 3 areas. Once you get that plan, in that you should also consider, do you want to keep your school resource officers? I'll tell you, it varies. Some people feel, I will be your last school standing. Until the day you tell me that we can no longer have them, I will be. And we say, that's great. I support that. Because if it works for you, that works for me. Other schools are like, you know what, I think we've evolved and I don't think we need them. If we need them, we have a great relationship with our commander and we'll loop them in if there's a problem. But for everybody else, no, we don't need them in there 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And so with that, the local school council, which is a democratically elected body for each school, they will decide, they vote, and they will decide if they will keep the SRO program. And so here's where we are from last year. Coming out of pandemic, things were a little bit, still shaky. We're still kind of getting over the pandemic. So most schools were status quo. The first year we entered into this program, which was 2 years ago, 53 high schools had SRO program, and 12 of them removed both SROs. Then the year after that, we had 41 schools left. Of that, 2 schools removed one SRO and 1 school removed both. And then this past year, everybody stayed status quo except 2 schools, Marshall High School, which removed both, and Boston High School on the west side, which removed 1. And so this is all public, this information. But the good thing about this is we're getting dialogue with our community stakeholders. This isn't just central office deciding or the CEO or the board deciding. This is the community defining their own destiny on how they want to keep their school safe. And we love it because if there are other things that they want to do, so for example, if you trade in your SRO, you can buy a climate and culture coordinator. You can buy a restorative justice coordinator. You can also buy a security officer. A lot of people do not do that because they're trying to move away from that. But they could if they wanted to. And so again, when you have that ownership, when you have that buy-in, that engagement, you have a higher likelihood of success. And that's what we're aiming for with this. And so that's our path forward. This is my last slide. We're going to continue to work with our 5 community-based organizations. As a matter of fact, they're going to host, they decided, they're going to host a whole school safety conference this summer. And so you will see it on our website, and anyone is welcome to come. It's free, of course. But we'll serve food, and we'll talk about safety in schools, and we'll talk about really how this whole process of engagement works. In addition, we're going to be launching a market research study, working with a university on what does it mean to be safe in schools. And also, the question everyone wants to know is what does the impact of school resource officers have on our day? Doesn't everyone want to know? Nationally, there's research that shows that it actually does fuel the school-to-prison pipeline. The thinking is, if you have police in schools, there's a more likelihood you're going to have an adverse police reaction or interaction. I actually maintain, this is what we're going to test, the hypothesis in Chicago is different. Because the police we have in our buildings have relationships with our students. And because the police in our buildings actually understand our policies and understand the law, and so as a matter of fact, they might actually avert an adverse police interaction. And we see this. So if somebody says, oh, I want to call the police on this incident, the SRO actually sort of paradoxically says, you know what, that's not an SRO thing, that's not a police thing. And you actually avert potential non-necessary police interaction. But we'll see. I mean, that's what the research is going to show. I'm not advocating one way or the other. Again, the local school gets to decide. And then lastly, this is going pretty well, and so we're going to look to put the whole school safety process in some of our elementary schools. So even though they don't have SROs, elementary schools do not have SROs, and we're not going to add SROs to elementary schools. But the concept of physical and emotional safety and relational trust applies to all schools. And so we have schools raising their hands saying, we want to use this process. So we're going to give it a go, and I think it's going to be successful. And so with that, I have an appendix for later view. I mean, I find this deck can be made public. This is available for everybody's interest. And with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Yeah, so Jadine, there have been 13 schools that have removed now. So how has the sentiment been from your perspective? And Superintendent Waller, how is the relationship between those schools and your department? How has that been?
Our relationship with Jadine and CPS Safety and Security is really outstanding. Jadine and I, even before me coming back, talk all the time, coordinate how the resources and the resource officers are going to be used. So we've always had a great relationship, and that continues. And there's no animosity or anything with the officers. Some officers being taken out, and we've also had some conversation about repurposing some of those officers. So the relationship has always been really good.
Yeah, and I'll maintain, again, we work regularly, not only with superintendent, actually every morning, a set of my people meet every single day with a set of police officers. We have a dedicated group that works with us. I meet biweekly with Deputy General Counsel Scott Spears, and We got Dan O'Connor and others who we meet regularly with every other week. So that relationship's really tight. On the relationship at the school level, we want to make sure that that's also tight. Very grateful. Superintendent and Chief Brian McDermott actually set up where the commanders have regular police meetings with our principals. And so that is extremely important in maintaining that relationship. And I maintain, again, we're very fortunate. I talk to safety and security colleagues of mine all across the country, and I tell them about the relationship we have between our school district and our police department. No one has what we have. And I mean that, and I'm just saying, I'm so grateful. The superintendent's kept us going, Scott and others. So lucky, because we are confident that, God forbid, if we did have a serious incident, we know that CPD will keep us safe. So thank you for asking that question.
Jadine, if for some reason a particular officer is not working out in the school, either for the LSC's perspective or from the principal's perspective, is there the opportunity to change out and get a different officer, and how does that happen, and does it happen frequently?
So 3 years ago, as part of the launch of this, and we work very closely with COPA, Andrea Kirsten's office, to help us. First on the front end, let me just start by saying there is a whole new vetting process before SROs are even able to go into a school, be able to be considered for working in a school. There's an entire vetting process that reviews their historical, any disciplinary issues or any concerns. Once they're in the school, or so even before they're in the school, there's an entire rigorous training program. And so we work very closely with Jack Benigno in the training office to make sure that there's a rigorous 5-day baseline training, plus we do an extra Chicago CPS training, and that's refreshed every year. So you got that baseline. And then once they're in the building, if there is an issue, let's say there's we have a process in our MOU between our two organizations that has us working with our colleagues in CPD at the superintendent's office, and COPA gets involved as we look at the records, and there's a process to move someone out. And so it's something that, in recent years we have not had to do, thankfully, and I think that's partially because the people who are in there now have opted in. They raise their hand and say, I want to work in this role, and the principals say, and I want to work with them too, so it works out really well.
Jadine, could you talk a little bit about what the role of an SRO actually is, and on a day-to-day basis, what they're supposed to be doing and what a successful SRO looks like?
That's my appendix slide. Just in case someone asks me, what are the roles of SROs? I'm not going to read through this, but I'm going to highlight it. Okay, the role of the SRO there is not to be like another security guard. The role of the SRO is really to bridge that relationship between the students and the Chicago Police Department. What I see when I go into schools and I see the SROs, they're not just sitting in a room. They're out and about greeting and building relationship with students, meeting them, knowing their names, and saying, I'm whoever, officer, child, whatever. That is the first and foremost visible presence and positive student relationships. But outside of that, they are police officers. So if there is a safety issue, they are there. There are connectivity to the district. So oftentimes, if we know there's going to, like Facebook threats, things like that, they will work with our team, Office of Safety and Security, and our partners at CPD, and we'll work on those kind of situations and safety situations. I want to highlight for everybody, we do not ask our police to get involved with disciplinary actions. I think that's where we get into problems in other cities where police get involved with matters that are not police matters. And so we say, let the security officer and the administration of the school handle that. And that will keep the security officers doing their job, the police officers doing their job. And so there's a really good split. Again, safety, like drills, they're involved with that. And really primarily making sure that, again, they're playing the police role in keeping schools safe while building that relationship. And I was talking to someone earlier before the meeting started. It really kind of serves as a microcosm for the possibilities when our police officers build relationships with our school communities. It's very positive. And if you came in, we've had the consent decree monitor come visit our schools, some site visits. And this is so pleasant, to see this relationship. Young people trusting the police and vice versa. It's nice. It's possible. So we like to show that. So, and the last thing, again, not getting involved. CPD is forbidden, and I say forbidden from our standpoint. You are not to ask a police officer to get involved with a situation like removing a child from a classroom. That's policy, and don't do it. That's what we tell administrators. And the good news is we haven't had any serious incidents like that of recent. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, tell me this, how are you engaging like the student governance, student council to be involved with this whole matter of safe schools?
Whole school safety, yeah. So the whole school safety committee, first and foremost, is supposed to have a representative group of school community stakeholders. We doubled the number. We got to have a minimum of 2 students on the whole school safety committee.
Good.
A lot of schools did go to their student government to recruit the 2, or they went to the student voice committee to recruit the 2. The goal of this is not only to recruit those that are just natural leaders, but to recruit everybody, maybe some of those who, centering the experiences of those who maybe aren't on the student government. We want all of the students to be involved. So with that, whole school safety conference I'm talking about this summer, one of the things we're trying to do is go to all the schools and literally, like, we've got funding to rent buses to have kids and then send them to come join us at this conference to talk about a movement where we get kids involved in the conversation around school safety. And I believe if we do that, again, that's going to be our best strategy towards keeping these schools safe when the kids understand their role. And it's not just you come to school, that's great, which is important, but you also play a role in building those relationships, trusting adults, telling us what we need to do that's better. And so that's our plan to get more engagement. So more to follow on that. And I'm getting the audience
Ms.
question.
Jennifer
Okay.
Edwards.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question. We attended some meetings, it's been a couple of years ago, with some of the state reps, and they were talking about bringing the truant officers back. Now, the truant officers were not really police, but they knew the families. They'd go out and they would talk to the families, see what's going on with the kids, what's happening. Are you thinking about something like that? Because I saw that in action. It was very good. They knew their students.
Yeah. Where did you see them in action? In Chicago?
It was in Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question. So especially coming back from the pandemic, we know a lot of young people, a lot of students did not re-engage like they were supposed to. When we went remote in March of 2020, everybody went remote, right? Kids didn't come to school. But then when we came back from the pandemic, a lot of kids didn't come back either. So a lot of efforts were made to go door to door. You call them truant officers. They're really, I think maybe the equivalent of that, correct me if I'm wrong, are like re-engagement people, right? Because truancy has a connotation of there's maybe you broke a law, you broke a policy, truancy is a negative. We believe in re-engagement. And so the summer we went to bring kids back from the pandemic, we knocked on thousands of doors. We recruited our safe passage people, teachers, security officers, principals, did that, and it was effective. The part where it's not effective are for the kids who need it the most. And so one of the things that we know is when young people, the ones who are really furthest disengaged, they're not coming back to school because they don't know they're supposed to be in school. Like, they're like, oh, I'm supposed to be in school? I forgot. There are barriers, and I know you know this because we know each other. There are barriers that many of our young people have that prohibit them from going. I'll give you some examples. Meet a lot of young people, they have their own children, so the child care is prohibitive because they got to work. They have to, essentially feed their family. We have others that have other mental health challenges, substance abuse challenges. The school district has to provide the right supports to make sure these kids can be successful when they come in. The reality of it is, especially for those needs that are really, really deep, some schools either don't know they have those ability or don't feel they have the ability. And so these kids come back and they're not successful. And so one of the things we've done, and this is not part of your question, but I'm going to throw it in there, I'm so sorry, is we recognized that we needed to re-engage those kids that were furthest disengaged. One of the studies that University of Chicago Crime Lab did, do you know that when you read a newspaper and you see a teenager shot on the news, do you know that 90% of the time that's a student who's not engaged in school? I'm not saying not coming to school. They're not engaged. They're not enrolled. Okay, so it's not even that they're enrolled and they're not coming. They're not enrolled. And so when we saw those numbers combined with the pandemic, combined with what you're asking about, we said we got to do better. And so we launched this program called Back to Our Future. I don't know if you might see it on CTA buses right now. We're advertising on buses. If you are a student that's been disengaged and want to come back but you don't know how, or if we knock on your door and say, we know you're out of school, we want you to come back, this is an opportunity where you will get paid. There's a pay period where we will get you re-engaged, we will get you life skills, we'll help address those barriers that we just talked about, and we'll start getting you on the road to credit recovery. We're not just going to put you back in the school, though, because we know that revolving door. We've seen that revolving door, and we don't want to waste anybody's time. So this program, and this past year, we had 465 kids. Really hard, relentlessly engagement. I'm not saying it's perfect. We've learned a lot. It's very hard. Some of them, again, we'll talk more about that later, but my point is we are on the same page on what needs to be done. I think how we do it is where we can have more conversation, because what we found is just knocking on the door, unless you've got services to support the real root causes, is hard to sustain that success. Does that help? Thank you for that question. I'm sorry? What is that program? It's called Back to Our Future, and I'll tell you, the kids named the program. And so when we asked them, where'd you get that name? Like, did you see the movie? It was on last night on Comcast. They're like, we have no idea what you're talking about. They don't know what the movie is. But they named Back to Our Future. And if you go to cps.edu, our website, and you do on the search Back to Our Future, there's a link to describe it. And if you know anybody, any neighbors, any friends, kids, whatever, there's an enrollment sheet. It's just for a referral. And we'll do an outreach. We work with 3 community-based organizations to launch this project. CPS is not like, we're not in there running it. We go to our community partners who are in the community. So we work with Breakthrough, Youth Advocate Program, and UCAN. So it's going well. University of Chicago is evaluating it for us. A lot of improvement opportunities, because it's hard. It's really hard. But when you meet these young people, you're like, it's so worth it. They want to come back, and we want them back.
All right, last question, Mr. Krista Noel.
Thank you. I was reading an article on fetal alcohol syndrome spectrum and how it's an endemic or endemic in the school systems. And I was wondering how often or how many nurses are actually in schools instead of police officers that are able to, because that's not a mental health problem, that's a neurological problem. So I was wondering how many nurses are in school. I was also wondering if art and gym is back in schools. I heard that they weren't doing that anymore, and that may be a reason why some of our kids are dancing on buses. But I also just want to say that thank you. This is the best presentation you had. Okay, you worked this one. Yeah, so I
would love to come back
you.
Anytime.
Yeah, I want to say thank you, so much for this presentation and
thank
the information.
Thank you so much. I'll answer your question. So let me talk about nurses. So before the pandemic, you saw CPS in the news a lot. There were not enough nurses. There was a nursing shortage, and there weren't enough nurses that were resourced, meaning they weren't even budgeted. Really understanding coming out of the pandemic that nurses from a physical and a mental health well-being is a high priority. So CPS has budgeted nurses for every school. They're on their way. So what I say by that is I can't tell you standing here right now that there's a nurse in every single school, but there's a commitment to get that in place. And your whole question about parks and activities and programming. Gyms and arts, and I think it's parks, sorry, gym and arts. Again, priority, well-rounded education. It's not just, the rigor of math and science. The arts and gym and physical education, all of that is equally important. Our new CEO, and I don't know if you guys heard, we have a new board. Did you guys hear? We have a new board, and I'm very excited about our new board. And they are very supportive of making sure that the educational experience encompasses all of that. They're holding all of us accountable to that. And so budget-wise, we have just changed, the CEO just announced they're changing the budget model. We're moving away from a per pupil model, which then in the past, for those of you familiar, per pupil actually is believed to have made it less resource for schools that have lower enrollment. It's a variable cost, that's how the math works. If we can make sure that we are budgeting so that every school has what they need, regardless of how many kids they have, that's where they're going with the new budget model. I'm not in the budget office, but I know that they're moving away from per pupil. That has been committed. The new mayor is also supportive of doing that, so more to follow on that. And as somebody, again, safety and security, all that ties together. If our kids are emotionally healthy and fulfilled, my job is really easy, and then I don't have to do anything. I love that. So we want to get there as well. So thank you for those questions. And I think that's it.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank
Really
you so much for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
Thank you. If there are any ideas, any things that you guys, the members of the public, would like to hear, we welcome any ideas. We often talk amongst ourselves or our colleagues from other departments and are kind of constantly seeking ideas that we can bring to present here to kind of talk about our entire public safety ecosystem. So if there's anything, like you said, you read an article, so if there's anything that you all read about, please let us know and we'll work to get a presentation here. Moving back to the board business, is there a motion to approve the drafts of the minutes of the board's public and closed meetings held on June 15th?
So moved, Paula Wolf.
Second, Michael Eady.
All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Our next regular public meeting will be held Thursday, August 17th at 7:30 p.m. This meeting will be held here at the Chicago Public Safety Headquarters. The Police Board meets in executive session to consider various matters. Those discussions are closed to the public as authorized by sections 2C1, 4, 11, and 21 of the Illinois Open Meetings Act. Information on matters discussed in the executive sessions is included in the minutes of this meeting posted on our website. Is there a motion to close future executive sessions as authorized by these sections of the Open Meetings Act?
So moved, Paula Wolf.
Second, Michael Eady.
All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Next is police disciplinary cases. The board hears cases when the superintendent files charges recommending that an officer be discharged from the Chicago Police Department for violating CPD's rules. The board is authorized by the Open Meetings Act, as discussed in a closed meeting, 2 police disciplinary cases. We will now take final action on these cases. Regarding case number 22 PB 3006, is there a motion to find police officer Daniel Otero guilty of violating Rule 2 by engaging in an improper sexual relationship while off duty and to suspend him without pay for 270 days?
So moved, Paula Wolf.
Second, Michael Eady.
I will now call on members of the board for their votes. Wolf?
Aye.
Block?
Aye.
Carr Favors?
Aye.
Cusack?
Aye.
Doorley?
Aye.
Edie?
Aye.
Montez?
Aye.
Sefakis?
Aye.
And I oppose the motion. Voting in favor are board members Wolf, Block, Carr, Favors, Cusack, Doorley, Edie, Montez, and Sefakis. I vote against the motion. The motion passes by a vote of 8-1. Is there a motion to adopt the written findings and decision and dissent that have been reviewed by all board members who participated in the case?
So moved, Paula Wolf.
Second, Michael Eady.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Regarding case number 22, PB 3008, is there a motion to find Sergeant Dennis Graber guilty of certain charges stemming from his responding to a domestic altercation involving an off-duty officer, not guilty of making a false statement, and to suspend him without pay for 60 days?
So-
moved, Morale Cusack.
Second, Stephen Block.
I will now call on members of the board for their votes. Wolf?
I oppose the motion.
Block?
Aye.
Carr Favors?
Aye.
Cusack?
Aye.
Doorley?
Aye.
Edie?
I oppose the motion.
Montez,
I oppose the motion.
Sefakis,
Aye.
and I oppose the motion. Voting in favor are board members Block, Carr favors Cusack, Doorley, and Sefakis. Board members Wolf, Edie, Montez, and I vote against the motion. The motion passes by a vote of 5-4. Is there a motion to adopt the written findings and decision and dissent that have been reviewed by all board members who participated in the case?
So moved. Ronnie Cusack.
Second, Stephen Block.
All in favor? Oh, no, I will. Any opposed? The motion passes. The written decisions in the case on which the board took final action this evening will be entered as of today's date, sent to the parties, and then posted on the board's website. There's also one announcement of a ruling in a disagreement case this evening. Board Member Doorley will make this announcement.
Good evening. I was randomly selected from the police board's membership to consider one matter on which the chief administrator of the Civilian Office of Police Accountability and the superintendent of police...
Nanette, can you move the mic a little closer?
I'll start from the beginning. I was randomly selected from the police board's membership to consider one matter on which the chief administrator of the Civilian Office of Police Accountability and the superintendent of police did not agree regarding the discipline of a police officer. In request for review number 23-03, the chief administrator recommended that police officer Jeremy Carter be discharged from the Chicago Police Department for discharging his firearm at a moving vehicle in violation of the Chicago Police Department policy and for failure to activate his body-worn camera. The superintendent proposed that the firearm discharge allegation not be sustained and that the officer be reprimanded for failing to activate his body-worn camera. After considering this matter, it is my opinion that the superintendent met the burden of overcoming the chief administrator's recommendation for discipline. The superintendent's proposed discipline will therefore be implemented. A copy of the written opinion will be posted on the board's website.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the police officer applicant appeals. When a person who applies to become a Chicago police officer is removed from the eligibility list due to results of a background examination, that person has a right to appeal to the police board. The board, as authorized by the Open Meetings Act, has discussed in a closed meeting several appeals. We will now take final action on these appeals. Is there a motion to affirm the decision to disqualify the applicant for the following appeals? 23 AA 09, 12, 13, 14, and 16, and reverse the decisions to disqualify the applicants for the following appeals: 23 AA, 10, 11, and 15.
So moved, Paula Wolf.
Second, Michael Eady.
I will now call on the members of the board for their votes. Wolf?
Aye.
Block?
Aye.
Carr favors.
Aye, except for 23AA11.
Cusack?
Aye.
Doorley?
Aye.
Edie?
Aye.
Montez?
Aye.
Sefakis?
Aye.
And I vote in favor of the motion. Voting in favor are board members Wolf, Block, Carr, Favors, Cusack, Doorley, Edie, Montez, Sefakis, and myself. The motion passes. The written decisions of these appeals will be entered as of today's date, sent to the parties, and posted on the board's website within 5 business days. Next, Superintendent Waller, if you could provide your report.
Okay, thank you. Good evening to all the police board members and community members that are present here today. As we open this month's meeting, I would like to begin by acknowledging the loss of 2 of our own over the last few days. Early yesterday, an off-duty officer passed away as a result of injuries sustained from a vehicular accident the night before. We also learned of the loss of a retired officer from an apparent suicide. Both of these men, although at different stages of their careers, faithfully served this city. As our department stands with their families during this difficult time, I ask all of you to join me in honoring their lives, their work, and their memories with a moment of silence. Thank you. This summer, like every summer in Chicago, has been a busy one. Already, the men and women of the Chicago Police Department have seen the city through the Pride Parade, NASCAR Street Race, and the 4th of July holiday activities and a number of other festivals. And we are ready and looking forward to Pitchfork Music Festival this upcoming weekend, Lollapalooza the first week of August, and the annual Bud Billiken Parade and Picnic the week after that. Just as we planned for and welcome Taylor Swift's The Eras Tour at Soldier Field, we'll do the same when Beyonce and the Renaissance Tour comes this weekend. We are always preparing for and monitoring events around the clock and adjusting our resources as needed. In addition, the city will host the National Homeland Security Conference in a few days. We will explore top issues in public safety, including its evolution and the role of local law enforcement these days. Year-round, the Chicago Police Department works tirelessly to enhance public safety for all. Year-round, and especially during the summer months, we're also dedicated to collaborating and engaging with our youth across the city. Tuesday, I had the chance to speak with students participating in the MICFA Challenge program. And last week, I took the opportunity to meet with youth and join young people involved in our department's Youth District Advisory Council, or YDAC, Summer Leadership Institute. Each discussion was an incredible exchange between not only myself and young people, but other members of our department. These young people were candid in sharing their hopes for our communities, their concerns with law enforcement, and their ideas of how we can better collaborate. It was really inspiring to hear from our kids and see these young people from different backgrounds and neighborhoods come together to use their voices. That's why the Chicago Police Department maintains youth programming like YDAC and sports leagues and after-school activities, all led by department members. And while we continue to work hand in hand with the Chicago Public Schools on engagement and security efforts across the school districts. As we join CPS in assessing school resource officers, or SROs, positions staffed by CPD personnel, we are committed to best outcomes for student safety and well-being. We know that an essential part of increasing public safety is supporting our youth and young adults. Because our work as the police department improves our communities by impacting lives. There's a page missing. Well, the gist of it is that SROs, as Jadine Child just said, is being reassessed. It's being reassessed by CPS, is being reassessed also by the Chicago Police Department. There is an air of liability when officers go into the school, but there's also a great deal more of training that the police officers are taking a part in as they become SROs. As she spoke of how the officers are vetted before they go in, so there's a lot more instruction and a lot more vetting that goes into it before you become an SRO. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Superintendent. Next, Chief Kirsten.
Thank you, President Foreman. As I do every month at the police board meeting, I'll start with just a few report outs on statistics from last month. So this is reflecting June statistics. COPA received 348 total complaints and notifications last month. 65 of those were retained under COPA's jurisdiction. And again, the highest complaint category, 32% of our retained cases were improper search or seizure or Fourth Amendment allegations. There were 2 officer-involved shooting notifications from June, and we concluded 4 officer-involved shooting cases and made recommendations to the department. Of the total cases closed, we closed 73 cases last month, and 25% of those included sustained findings and disciplinary recommendations, which are now with the department for their review. We also released 1 video under the city's video release policy, 1 officer-involved shooting video from an incident that occurred near 2200 West Maypole. It involved an off-duty officer. I'd also like to talk just briefly, very proud of the fact that halfway through this year, we have recorded 110 different community engagement events that COPA has participated in. That's actually 10 more than we did all of 2022. And that represents over 9,000 different points of contact made by our agency throughout the city. We have a lot more work to do in that space, but one of the many goals that we put forth for ourselves this year with our work alongside the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability is increased community engagement. So we are excited about the progress that's been made in that space. Then lastly, I'd just like to comment briefly on a couple of the disciplinary matters that were resolved tonight. First of all, the first case that was mentioned, and let me begin actually by saying how much I appreciate the board's deliberation on all of the cases before you all as a body. I know that work is difficult. For those in the audience or watching online that may not understand how some of this functions, when a COPA investigation concludes and discipline is going to go forward towards the police board, it's always listed as the superintendent filing charges because that's the legal mechanism for how this all occurs. But the very first investigation that you all reported out on involving sexual misconduct, that was a COPA investigation. It was in fact our first sexual misconduct investigation that we conducted as an agency. It began several years ago, obviously. I think it's important for members of the public to understand how long it takes for a case to go through complaint, to investigation, to recommendation, to full hearing at police board and ultimate resolution. COPA has an obligation to continue to do our part in a timely manner and increase our timeliness on those investigations. But the complex system of accountability that we operate within is a lengthy one. So I think it's important to kind of take a moment to understand all of the components that go into a complaint coming in the door all the way out to discharge being ultimately rendered, discharge or discipline of any kind. I'd also like to say that while I am heartened by the finding of sustaining the allegations in that case in particular, our original recommendation and that of the superintendent was, of course, separation or discharge from the police department. I think it's also important for the public to understand that when a matter goes to full hearing after our investigation, it's up to the police board to decide what the appropriate amount of discipline is. And so sometimes what the recommendation of either COPA or the superintendent is doesn't end up being what the ultimate discipline amounts to based on all the additional facts and evidence that the police board gets to hear. And then lastly, I'll say, just staying on the same case for a moment, this case represents sexual relationships occurring, or a relationship occurring between an officer that met someone in the course of his employment, someone whose home he responded to as a result of a call for service, a home invasion in particular. And that relationship resulted in a sexual relationship, one-time sexual relationship, shortly after the call for service. There is not a specific policy within the department that COPA is aware of or has identified that more carefully crafts where some of those boundaries should exist between the police and members of the public that they encounter in the course of their professional employment. This was an off-duty incident, and there are many other general police rules that we were able to bring forth these recommendations based on, such as the duty to not bring discredit to the department or conduct conduct that's unbecoming. But COPA's Policy Research and Analysis Division is looking at this issue specifically to try to make better recommendations to tighten the rules governing this kind of conduct moving forward. And we look forward to partnership with the department in those efforts. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and in that one, I would strongly encourage those who are interested to read the opinion of the board. I think we speak upon some of that you mentioned. I will now call upon members of the public who signed up in advance to speak. There's a 2-minute time limit. I will be holding strict to that today. Our first speaker is Christia Gentry. Krista Noel. I have you named here. No, well, that was the first one. Second, Krista Noel. Here. Yeah, upgrade.
Where's the guy who snatches it from? Where's the cop? Y'all in the back. Hey, everybody. How you doing? Good evening. Okay, so, I usually pop up when something really goes wrong. First, I want to update you on Elijah's case. We did get his gun back. We bum rushed the commander at a coffee, and he didn't even know who he was. I think I told you. But we ended up getting his gun back. But We wanted to have some training on how to engage with CCL holders and cops so it didn't happen again, and that never came to fruition. So we still have a problem with that and want to move forward with that. So I'm here basically today because of what happened in the 10th District. I respect what Andrea has said, that we basically have no information whatsoever. We do not have a victim who has come forward, and I don't agree with Catanza all the time. That's what I call Catanzara. I don't agree with him all the time. Like most of the time, I don't agree with him. But if we don't have anything on this cop, sexual assault is a pretty evil kind of accusation. And so unless we can prove it happened, I agree that we should keep the name under wraps. But with that being said, as a member of the Coalition for the Consent Decree, we got zero tolerance with sexual assault, so I'm kind of upset that there are 5 to 4 women on the board and that any woman would allow for this cop. I agree with you, Gian, this cop who did the sexual assault on duty. Whatever the hell he did, he shouldn't have had any relationship with any woman who he went to a call to first. So I agree with you, Andrea, agree with you, Gian, and I am sorry. I totally disagree with you guys. Zero tolerance on sexual assault. Not so much on domestic violence. We don't want him turning around and killing his wife, but we definitely do have zero tolerance when it comes to sexual assault, and the consent decree will engage because of this.
I just would like to clarify, and I know you haven't had a chance to read the decision. No one on the board condoned the sexual assault. That's unanimous among us. The question was the penalty that should be levied, and as the administrator said, there is no rule that can't happen. We're bound by what rules and conditions are brought forward to us to make rulings on. We do recommend in the decision that the police department develop such a rule. So if this happens again, we're not in a position where we...
Yeah, I also just want to be clear. It's not sexual assault. It was a consensual sexual entanglement that happened. The officer met the person while on duty, and shortly thereafter, he got off duty. There was a connection, and so it was not a sexual assault. But it'll be posted online.
I will rescind that it was a sexual assault. It was an inappropriate sexual relationship.
Yes.
And he should have been fired. If you said he should have been fired, if it was suggested that he should have been fired, he should have been fired. You don't come to somebody's house on something else and then come back later and go, hey, let's have sex. It's not cool. Police officers should never do it. And whoever voted that's cool and he should have 270 days off, I hope that's unpaid.
Yeah. Again,
it's just wrong.
And again, we try not to comment on this. There is no rule for it, right? And so I think that's part of what we're saying is that some of this should be some common sense, but there is no rule around this. There's some rules to say you can't do something that embarrasses the department. You can't, there's some, and so there's some gray. I'm not gonna go further. Read it. I know you'll be back next month. I don't have to worry about that. No, it's important. It's important though.
It's gonna be handled.
Okay.
Zero tolerance. You don't come to my house over something else and then come back later and have sex with me. You just don't. Yeah. That's inappropriate.
But I'm going to ask, just do me a favor, please, Krista. Just
what?
read.
I ain't reading it. Well, I'll probably read it.
Thank you.
Because I got it.
All right. Our next speaker, C.C. Edwards. C.C. Edwards. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, board members and vice president. Wolf, nice to see you again. I hope you brought brownies again. Anyway, nice to see you again, Superintendent Waller. I did want to point out that we did get a lot of results from our last meeting, but I'm here today to let you know that we did a FOIA request, and we made two previous requests, one to the police and one to the OEMC, and both claimed no knowledge of the pod cameras. Okay, 12 months later, on June 27, 2003, FOIA number 5049256 was answered by the Department of Transportation, and they stated that the pod cameras were on back order and they are out of stock for 75th in Indiana. So we do need that to be looked into. We need those cameras. It's very critical for 75th and Prairie and Calumet. And there's a rumor that there's supposed to be one there on Calumet, but we haven't seen it. We also have a need for one at 75th and St. Lawrence. There is one, Superintendent, on the other side of the street, but it's blocked by really large trees. So it's like ineffective. So we need to, Chief Ben said we could move it to the other side of the street on the, I guess on the odd side of the street. And that's what we want to do on 75th Street and St. Lawrence. So if possible, if we could get some help there. And I'd also like to ask one more question. We also requested the patrol officers, because they've been doing an excellent job. It's been very quiet on 75th Street between State and Cottage Grove. There's been a few incidents, but mostly it's been very, very well taken care of by the 6th and the 3rd District. Both Commander Watson and Commander Tate need to be congratulated. We really appreciate them. And lastly, we'd like the police officers to exit the vehicle when they see excessive loitering, especially at 75th and Prairie.
Thank you.
And my last question is to the Attorney General.
I'm sorry. We have to be strict on time.
Oh,
today.
really? Okay,
Yes.
well, I can ask her afterwards, because
Yes,
I need the
thank you.
form. I need to know if there's a form. Okay,
Next,
so I'm just
Ms.
giving you an
Jennifer
answer.
Edwards.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll try to be quick, because you asked, is there a subject that you would go over? And the subject would be the crime victims advocate for the police department. I'm requesting one for the 6th District, and I'm going to give you an example by Ms. Lori Burns of her problem that she had when her uncle was shot. And I'll try to read quickly so I can be within the time. Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to request support for victims of violent crime as a resident of the 6th District. Last month, our family experienced what's become all too common in our nation and city, a terrifying call that a loved one was shot and critically injured while working as a home health care aide. City of Chicago and Chicago Police Department websites list support and services for victims of violence, but these seem limited by geography and difficult to navigate. Simply procuring a copy of the police report was a struggle. Having to go in person to CPD headquarters in the middle of the workday only to be unprofessionally told at the window no was unacceptable. This literally added insult to injury. Thankfully, a sergeant intervened. How do victims who can't physically show up because they're hospitalized or worse, deceased, navigate such a rigid and inefficient system? Fellow community advocates from communities organized to win helped us connect with the crime victim advocate out of the 3rd District. After checking, it seems we don't have the same advocate services for the 6th District neighbors. Why not? We're often told at beat meetings, 6 is one of the busiest districts for calls for service, and it's a training district. Do officers and detectives have and share support information with crime victims and their families when tragedy strikes? If not, why not? How can we more easily get what's needed going forward? Resources and personnel must be distributed equitably and evaluated. Please take into consideration policy and practices to better inform support victims of the violent crime in the 6th District. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Superintendent, I know that they've been asking for this resource officer. I know you just started, but you're sitting in the seat now. They've been asking for this position for.
Right. We just spoke about that, increasing the victim, and we're trying to figure out how we can be most efficient with it. Should we put one in each area? That may not be enough because, as you said, as Jennifer said, there's one in the 3rd district, which is really outside the area of the 6th district, which is in area 2. So we're trying to figure that out. So it is being talked about, and I don't know how we can, because we have to hire some more. That's the problem. We have to hire some more. So we're working on it. Right. Right. Okay.
So,
we are working on it.
Superintendent, just for clarity purposes, when you say it's in a different area, can you explain what that means?
The 3rd district is in area 1, and they come out. Their area is at 51st and Wentworth. Area 2 is with the 6th district, and they come out of 111. So that's it's not an issue really because they border each other. So we may even be able to work out something in that way because they're right there, right next to each other. So.
Thank you. Next speaker, Marquita Blake. Marquita, okay. Next speaker, Amina Matthews. Kim Green.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I live along the 75th Street corridor that has recently been experiencing violence, large crowds, lewd behavior, lawlessness, and other quality of life issues. And the residents of the 6th Ward have the right to peacefully enjoy their homes, and right now our rights are being continually violated. For the past few years, the neighbors have been working with the 3rd and the 6th District, and we have seen some improvement. However, there's a lot to be done. I urge CPD to re-implement the strategy that they used in 2021, which worked. It included parking restrictions, streets blocked off, ticketing and towing, moving people along that were loitering and disruptive, and also having 10 to 12 officers walking up and down 75th Street. Consistency, 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 and enforcement, that's the key to reclaiming order in the 3rd and the 6th District along 75th Street. We don't want our neighborhood to be in the media simply because of the outrageous activities that have been happening. We want our neighborhood to be featured as a community that works with the 3rd and the 6th District and become a model of how to solve the quality of life issues that other neighborhoods all across the city are currently experiencing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Robert Moore. Cecilia Butler.
Good evening. My name is Cecilia Butler, and I represent the Washington Park Advisory Council and the Washington Park Residents Advocacy Council. I'm not here to downplay the 2nd District CAPS program, but we do have a complaint. And as of this year, we, prior to COVID, in Washington Park, 2nd District, 231, 232, those beats, we met simultaneously from 51st Street to 60th Street, from the Dan Ryan to the lake. We met at Washington Park when it was needed, the field house. This year, we've been, the residents west of King Drive have been kicked out of the field house for meetings. We were told that your beat meeting has to be within that certain area. If beat 231 is located, the meeting had to be within that area. And what happened is that that particular beat is now meeting in a senior citizen home at 6:30 in the evening, every other month. And the smaller beats, or the south beat, say 232, is meeting at the Legion Hall. Now, we feel that the Legion Hall or the senior citizen location are not fit to have CAPS meetings when we have a newly renovated field house. You know who meets at our field house? Everyone east to Cottage Grove. Now, if you know that community east to Cottage Grove, you know they have at least 4 parks.
Yeah,
We have one.
I'm sorry, Ms. Butler. Soup, is there a reason why?
I'll have to find that out. I don't know offhand why they would move them out of the field house to some other locations out, but I can find out. I'll find that out.
Okay.
I know Ms. Butler, so I'll be in contact. And
Oh, he was the commander of 2.
I was
Of course
commander
you
too.
know
You don't
Ms.
remember
Butler.
that. Yeah. She doesn't remember that, but that's okay. We'll find out, and I'll have the commander reach out to you.
Please do.
We will.
Yeah, I'll follow up with you as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Cassie Crosley. Cassie Crosley. Okay. Beatrice Bolden. Same. Catherine Province. At this time, all members of the public who signed up to speak have been called. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Paula Wolf.
Second, Michael Eady.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Wait. Let's withdraw that.
I retract my motion.
Yes. Catherine Province.
Hello. I don't have a whole lot to say. I came here today in relation to the sexual assault that has been, isn't being under investigation in the 10th District. And at the very least, we need a swift investigation. And these 4 officers that were involved, they do need to be fired. This kind of thing just really shows that the housing of our migrant workers from other countries is more so about 2 capitalist factions fighting each other than it is about taking care of people. And at the very least, these officers should be swiftly investigated and fired. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. At this time, all members of the public who signed up to speak have been called. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Paula Wolf.
Second, Michael Eady.
All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
The motion passes. Thank you very much.